I'll start with an anecdotal discussion of what happened, how this memorial got going. I called up Thomas Fuller, and we met in a restaurant, actually in a coffee shop. And Thomas said, and I told him what happened. Of course, Thomas was the last among all of us to see Hal before he passed away, because he helped Hal move to Coeur, Idaho, and he was there, and it was quite a surprise that this happened. It was not expected. And the family's reaction to the whole situation was to just a little family get together and that's it. Don't come. You know. And so it was Thomas who recommended that we do a memorial. And I said, yeah, we need to do one. And I'm really happy we did, because this is really incredible, and I have more to add. Okay, so the problem was, who do I contact other than Thomas? I didn't know any of these people that Hal knew, because he knew a lot of people. He was working with a lot of different people. He was being actually paid by a lot of different people to do studies and what have you. So I called up Carol, his wife, and I said, Carol, can you help me? And she says, well, his phone is kaput. We can't do anything. The address book is hidden in who knows where. And Hal didn't keep a list. It was all, he had a photographic memory, and everything was in his head. So I was stuck. How do I get to the people? So Thomas and I, we discussed it, and so what Thomas did, it's amazing. He went in to, Thomas ended up with a lot of the reports, and he went in and took the pictures of the covers of about 70 or 80 reports. And I had to try to track these people down. And I am fortunate and blessed that I was able to find what I consider to be the most significant of the individuals that he worked with in North America. And 3 of them couldn't be here, but they sent a statement. Okay, and I'm going to go through that with you. So that's the story of how, and also Craig and Al, they came out of this process as well. So I'm very happy they came. So the first one I'm going to read is from
just scoot over here, just talk about that picture, which is an
yeah,
deal, but it's just more like a...
Why don't we go?
Do you want to go up here? Or?
Yeah, why don't we do this here?
Yeah. I think that's...
Okay, here, just go ahead. Okay. So the first one I'm going to read is from my friends in Vancouver. And my friends in Vancouver, let me find it first. Okay, here it is. My friends in Vancouver created something called the Canadian Society for the New Humanist Paradigm. And the problem is that they're in Canada. And Canada is part of the empire. Mm-hmm. And they don't allow LaRouche in Canada. So they formed the Canadian Society for the New Humanist Paradigm with the idea of bringing Canada into the new paradigm. That's very visionary. And in a discussion a few years before, we decided to take Lynn's 4 laws, economic laws, and apply them to Canada. And a key component of that was Hal Cooper, who worked with us on designing how you would connect Alaska, Asia with Canada, and this became our program called the 4-Point Plan for Canada's Future in the Eurasian Century. Okay, so this was put out, and Hal played a major role in this. And so I'm going to read you from the Society for the New Humanist Paradigm, Canadian Society for the New. Okay, it was with great sadness that we at the Society learned of the passing of Dr. Hal Cooper. He was a humanist of the finest kind that used his skills as an engineer to promote and further huge infrastructure projects for the betterment of humanity. Whenever the term peace through development is spoken, we think of Hal because he epitomized that ideal. People like Hal only come along once in a lifetime, and their accomplishments need to be celebrated as well as respected. To do the kind of work that Hal did came at great personal cost and sacrifice. But Hal always had a hopeful spirit and an independent mind, no matter the outside pressure or the political system, which at times said no. He provided the crucial and essential groundwork of the new paradigm that we are all fighting so hard to bring into being. Without Hal's work, our vision of the new paradigm would be less. Where naysayers and cynics say that the new paradigm is impossible, Hal's indomitable fighting spirit said, of course, it's possible. And then he showed us how. His mind, his spirit, and his legacy will be cherished and kept alive through his fight to bring humanity a new paradigm. We will deeply miss Hal, Canadian Society for a New Humanist Paradigm. Okay, so so the next one I'm going to read is very interesting. His name, the name of this person, he's in Alaska. His name is Ted B. Trueblood. And he worked 14 years with Alaska Pacific Rail as on bridges. He was working in bridge design and bridge construction. And then later, he formed a major civil engineering firm, and he had worked in that area up in Alaska. And he and Hal worked together with the other guy I'm going to read you his Canadian associate. And I'm going to read his comments next after this. And they almost pulled off getting a rail line built from Alberta to Anchorage, to Alaska, which would then be the basis for going, which is very crucial, or to the port, actually to the port, to a port in Alaska. And they call it A2A, Alaska to Alberta. Okay, so I'll read this. I first met Hal about 40 years ago while I was the chief of engineering services at the Alaska Railroad. Hal had come by to gather information from us relating to his efforts to push an extension of the North American railroad system to Alaska and further beyond to Asia. Over the following years, I had the opportunity to meet with Hal at various railroad engineering conferences and special meetings to evaluate the concept of a railroad connection to Alaska. Hal was a pleasure to work with, full of big ideas, but he was very practical in assessing the economic viability of every option. Although Hal's passionate efforts to foster momentum on his railroad extension vision did not result in any track construction, he surely would be pleased that current conditions regarding world energy markets would finally provide the push to make his dream come true. So what's happening now is Alberta is in a rebellion against the Crown, against the British, because they want to get their oil out, and they can only get it to the U.S. at 1/4 the price that they could get it on down to Houston at 1/4 the price. So Alberta is now docking to Alaska to get the rail from Alberta to Alaska to get the oil out from Alberta. But in the course of building the rail, all the locked up mineral resources of northern Canada and Alaska can also come out. And there is a huge, in the Yukon, there's even bigger reserves of oil there. So this is now like what, well, not quite yet, but like what Thomas was saying about the bridge. This is coming to fruition, and Hal has done the work for this that will probably be used to do this. So that's another example. So, and now I'm going to read. This is from the president of the now no longer existing Arctic Rail Company, David S. Broadbent. And this is what Craig was referring to. I first met Hal in 1999 at a conference we had organized in Vancouver to see what interest there was in pursuing a rail connection between northern British Columbia and Alaska. Hal required little encouragement to jump in with both feet and start an independent feasibility study. 5 years later, in December 2005, he handed me with a 2,500-page, 3-volume technical and economic feasibility study for the Alaska-Canada Railway Connector. Hal being the only true global thinker I ever worked with, including how the connection would be a key in a global standard gauge rail network that would link all the major continents except Australia. This may seem incredible, but the only large engineering challenge would be a rail tunnel under the Bering Strait between Alaska and Russia. And because the Diomede Islands in the middle of the strait, the length wouldn't be any greater than the Channel Tunnel and shorter than the Japanese rail tunnel to the island of Hokkaido. In accomplishing this enormous task, Hal traveled the world and went to many conferences, Russia, Europe, and North America, giving presentations and lectures. I had the honor and privilege of accompanying Hal on several North American presentations, including where I was a co-presenter with Hal. Over time, I believe we became good friends. I believe this brilliant human being who thought on national, state, and provincial boundaries as just lines on a map felt that all people in the world would benefit from our knowledge and skills in engineering and science. My fondest memories of Hal were 2 4,000-mile-plus road trips we took from Vancouver to Alaska, returning to Alberta, Saskatchewan, North and South Dakota, Montana, Idaho, and Washington. We did one winter trip and one spring-summer trip, looking at all existing rail systems and giving presentations in various communities, including local rail talk shows, local radio talk shows, or local TV units. If you want to know someone well, spend 4, 5, or 6 weeks in a pickup truck traveling over 8,000 miles from western North America. The passing of Dr. Hal Cooper will leave a massive hole in the world's knowledge bank of transportation, communications, and environmental engineering and economics. He did leave copious amounts of written material, but nothing written compares with the knowledge in the mind of a man like Hal Cooper. He will be missed, and the world will be a lesser place without his guidance and goodwill. They always say anyone can be replaced, but the truth is the opposite. There are a small group of people in history that can't be and never were replaced. Just fumble along until the next one shows up. Hal was one of those few that will be irreplaceable. J. David S. Broadbent. And the last one is a short one from a friend, from someone he has worked in Tacoma. And his name is Mike Curran, and he has a business called Puget Sound Specialties in Coeur, and mainly it's wholesale farm agricultural inputs, fertilizer, soil, different things like that. And he's known Hal for a long time. I have known and deeply respected Dr. Dr. Cooper as a friend and colleague for nearly 25 years. As a West Point alum and graduate aerospace systems engineer, i.e. rocket scientist, I have been associated with some of the most brilliant people this world has produced. But Dr. Cooper was brilliance on steroids. By far the smartest person I have seen. His brilliance was only exceeded by his humility, his love of family and country, and willingness to help others, of which I was one. I first met Dr. Cooper in the spring of 1998 when Sound Transit was in the process of unfairly seizing my Tacoma property for the Tacoma Light Rail under the fraudulent pretext of eminent domain. Dr. Cooper designed the maintenance building and track layout for the Tacoma Light Rail, and after nearly a year of difficult dealing with the Sound Transit, he succeeded in saving my property, for which I will be forever grateful. He definitely was the smartest kid in the class and the nicest. I consider knowing Dr. Cooper to be a great honor, and I will miss our having lunch together, our meetings, our phone calls, but most of all, his friendship. My sincere condolences to his family, his friends and family. Mike Kerman. Now, he has saved a lion's share of Hal's work. Hal stored a lot of his work with Mike, and he, as Hal was very depressed at some point near the end, when he moved to Coeur, Alene, his last phone call with Mike, Mike asked him, "What do you want me to do?" Dump it. No way.
What?
Dump it. And no way, that's not going to get dumped. And it's a lot there. So this tells you something. We do have something to continue. Now on this question, quickly on this question of the eminent domain, and you can correct me or not, but sometimes they use eminent domain to seize valuable property beyond what is needed. And then you have to fight them in court. And so Hal was able to demonstrate that they didn't need that, because if they did it the right way, they wouldn't need, I think that's what it was, I'm not sure. But that's kind of like what he did in that situation. So, now I personally became the strategic briefer to Hal over many years. I would meet with him and give him a global strategic update, and he would always demand it of me, especially in the latter period when he was cut off from a lot of things. So I spent a lot of time, and we would go, for many years we would go meet at our favorite place again. No, not food, this time, it was the Third Place Books, which was halfway between where I was and where he lived. We could go there and we could talk forever. And I would give him an update, and he would give me an update. And
Coffee and pastry.
Coffee and pastry. So anyhow, that's all I have to say. I'm very happy that we did this, and we, we intend to continue. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Well, I do think what Paul expressed and what has been expressed, that this is an idea of a living memorial, that it's a remembrance of somebody who's passed, but clearly with this quality of work, and as we're finding people that he's intersected all over the planet, I've been personally with him to the post offices where he's been sending off these gigantic reports to people all over the world. So I think that these ideas and programs live on, but it lives on because we fight for it as well. So
we would like to present a piece by Mozart, Ave Verum Corpus, in honor of Hal. We can just look at Everybody's first note. This is a piece called In Bright Mansions Above. It's about the bittersweet contemplation of reuniting with those we've loved and lost.
In bright mansions above, in bright mansions above, Lord, I want to live up yonder, in bright mansions above. My mother's gone to glory, I want to go there too. Lord, I want to live up yonder, in bright mansions above, in bright mansions above, in bright mansions above. Lord, I want to live up yonder, in bright mansions above. My Father's gone to glory, I want to go there too. Lord, I want to live up yonder, in bright mansions above, in bright mansions above, in bright mansions above. Lord, I want to live up yonder, in bright mansions above. My Savior's gone to glory, I want to go there too. Lord, I want to live up yonder, in bright mansions above, in bright mansions above.